All right, welcome everyone to this event series, Pregnancy, Birth, and Beyond. My name is Rebecca Seagraves, and I am hosting a panel of absolutely wonderful experts on this topic. We are talking about tonight the benefits of having a doula for a planned hospital birth. And I plan to let these speakers that will be featured tonight really introduce themselves. I cannot do them justice. There is a lot of talent in this room, in this space, and the topic at hand is so important that it needs different perspectives all the way around. So I am absolutely honored to be joined by speakers that are coming from physical therapy, full spectrum doula services, innovators using technology, and really just a wide, diverse range of experience for the pregnant and postpartum community. So if I would first like to introduce Dr. J. Michelle Martin. She is a doctor of physical therapy, a full spectrum doula, an author, an international speaker. And I would like to actually have you introduce yourself and kind of open up the floor to your expertise in this area. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I apologize for my voice, but I am Dr. Joanne Michelle Martin. As Rebecca said, I am a pelvic floor therapist. I'm also a full spectrum doula, so I see clients both birth and postpartum. And I'm also a sex counselor. I've done postgraduate training as a sex counselor, and I love to marry all of these disciplines in my practice, which focuses on pelvic, perinatal, and sexual health. And I don't feel that one can exist without the other. So I really do enjoy being able to work in all facets of life with my clients.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much for being here. And Dr. Sylvester, you are the co-founder of Operation Mist. You have been working very closely with moms to avoid high blood pressure, preeclampsia, gestational diabetes, unnecessary C-sections, inductions, premature deliveries, miscarriages. How do you do what you do? Tell us more about your experience and the initiative that you founded.
So thank you for that beautiful introduction. As a mom, so I'll just start there. As a mom, I realized the gaps in maternal health care, and I had a doula for my births, and it was made better. The experience was made better because they were there. I did not have a birth at home, at the hospital, but I did have one at home, and it was amazing. And afterwards, with the support of my doula and midwife, as well as a wearable device, I was able to get myself back to health. And so the way that we like to use the data in conjunction with doulas is that we let them know in between their visits how their moms are doing, how they're responding to the exercises that they've given them, how they, when they leave the hospital, the things that they may need support with because their resting heart rate may still be elevated or their stress may still be high. And so the things that we expect to calm down, they haven't. And the doulas are the ones that go in and really do the work. And so we really love, even in the hospital, we actually just saw the need to add a labor doula to our team. I wouldn't say just, right, Dr. Thompson? We saw it, but we found someone that we knew would want to support. Because what we find is that we can support women through their data and empower them. But when they get into the labor and delivery room, sometimes they lose their voices, and doulas are there to give them that voice back. So we are able to just love on moms and show them that their bodies are not failing them, that they were designed to give birth. And we feel that there is no better partner to do that with than with doulas before delivery, during pregnancy and following delivery as well.
Excellent, excellent. And your co-founder is here with us tonight, Dr. Jessica Thompson. You are the owner of I'm going to actually say this right, the owner of Generational Health Physical Therapy and Wellness. And you're also a co-founder of Operation Miss, where you're detecting problems between OB visits. And in an effort to combat the Black maternal mortality crisis, you're offering services in the home and you're offering virtual visits to moms. Tell us a little bit about your work and how you work with doulas.
Thank you, Dr. Rebecca. I'm Jessica, and I really love what I do. My story is a lot different from Catherine's. I'm not a mom yet, but I just feel like I've been purposed to do this work for moms who are pregnant and postpartum. So I wanted to create a practice where I kind of meet moms where they are, and I understand how difficult it is for them to get out of their homes when they're pregnant, especially in the later terms, and then also when they're recently postpartum. And so I kind of meet them where they are by going to visit them in their homes and virtually for those visits, just so they can be comfortable, so they can have a little bit less stress, but still get the care that they need. So there aren't any gaps in the care. And I love working with doulas. I encourage everyone that I work with to work with doulas because we work so well together. And especially with the work that we're doing for Operation Miss, if a mother is comfortable with her doula and she feels a certain way, she has certain symptoms, where we kind of have the data to support whether or not those symptoms need to be investigated further, so we can make sure that they don't come up with that postpartum preeclampsia and all those things. So I love the work that I do as a physical therapist and as co-founder of Operation Mist, and I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you all, really. Without further ado, I'd be remiss if I did not personally introduce my own mentor that really brought me into this space and that actually opened my eyes to see that there were issues that were just being unaddressed, especially in our hospital settings. And so, Darlene Turner, you are a physician assistant by training. You turned to doula following the traumatic birth of your own daughter, your high-risk pregnancy with your son. And now you're the executive director of Healing Hands Community Doula Project. Tell us a little bit about your work and even beyond just helping our moms, the work that you're doing to really make pay, there to be equitable pay among doulas. We know that their work is often done in love, but they're not paid for it. And there's a lot of stigmas around how much we should be charging or expecting moms to contribute to their own success. I would love for you to speak about that.
Well, first, like this panel, I'm like, oh my God, look at its melanin. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm gonna be professional, but I saw y'all and I was just like, ooh, 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 ooh. So I'm just giving a little shout out for that because I don't get to be in such spaces very often. So it is a very, very high pleasure for me to be in the midst of all you doctor ladies. Yes. All right. Coming back and being professional now, I will say.
Let it all. You don't have to. Yeah, no. This is not that kind of panel.
Yeah, my name is Darlene Turner, and yes, I am a physician assistant by training. I worked clinically for 10 years in general internal medicine and women's health, and then moved to Texas and got married and decided to start my family, and basically it was a train wreck. I mean, there's no way to say it, but things do work out. My first little train wreck will be 20 on Friday. She is a freshman in college. She is studying fashion design. She is living her best life. Just called me like, Mom, I'm going to France in the summer. I was like, dang, okay. So, it has a happy ending. My second one, which was not a train wreck, and I think what was interesting was I had my children at 37 and 40. So that's the first thing. I had uterine fibroids, I had surgery, I had hormones, I had, they just had their way with me. And with my son, it was interesting. I was 40 when I had him, and nothing but what was interesting is I called my sister because the first time when everything was going crazy and I was hemorrhaging and my ex was standing there and no one was speaking to him. No one was telling him what was going on. I was hemorrhaging. The baby was having breathing issues. So she was over on the little baby bed and they were working on her. I was freaking out because at first she didn't cry. So like but at the same time, so I'm trying to get up off the bed, even though I had an epidural and I'm hemorrhaging. And they're like, you got to lay down. So they had to put the thing on my face because, I was not in control. And, but all that's going around, no one was speaking to him. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, you need to get him out of here because he is absolutely not a medical person with all that blood and slime, as he called it. I was like, my baby was not slimy, but slime, as he called it. It was a lot for him. And I honestly say, I think the man is still traumatized to this day. Our child will be 20, but we don't talk about it. We don't prepare for that. And, it just was not a good situation. And I can remember thinking, when all is said and done, if I live through this, because I was thinking at the time, am I going to make it after all of this to actually see this child? If I do, I'm going to fix this because this is crazy. Before I had my daughter, I had a miscarriage. After her, I had a miscarriage. And then I had my son, who is 16. So again, happy endings. But when I was having him, and my husband was so stressed, and I was just like, I cannot have him in the delivery room because that's not going to be helpful. So I said to him one night, would you be hurt if you weren't in the delivery room? He was like, no. So we called my sister and he was like, I will pay you any amount of money if you will go in there. And the thing was just having her there. She was my oldest sister. She had 2 kids and we were in there laughing. And, it was just a dramatically different experience. I mean, yes, I was still high risk because of my age, my history and everything else. I didn't have any problems with my son compared to what I had with my daughter. But even the birth, I had to have another C-section, but it was just, everything was smooth. It was smooth sailing. And I knew too, that if something happened, my sister would have flipped that roof off. And that's what I needed, because then I could just relax knowing I don't have to worry anything because my big sister will take all y'all out. And understand it, like later as I that thinking, we need to have people in there. I didn't know about doulas. I didn't know about the work of doulas. I just knew I wanted to provide that for women. Even as my son was a little baby, I was strapping him on and I was going to people's houses because people were like, well, you had a high risk pregnancy. Can you help my friend? So I was helping people. I didn't know. And so later, somebody said, you should start a business. I was like, ooh, I should. And so I started Mamas on Bed Rest and Beyond and was helping women who were on bed rest, because they put me on bed rest with my son, although I didn't stay on bed rest, but it was modified activity. And, just helping people, explaining to people what was going on. I think that's what we lose. We don't tell people what to expect. We don't explain that things can go wrong. No one had ever told me that my daughter would go to the NICU. I was upset because everybody's like, she's going to come out. They're going to put her on your chest. She's going to nurse. And that was not my experience with her. That was my experience with my son. But with my daughter, it was like she kind of went and was off to the NICU. And it was 12 hours before I really saw that child. And no one was telling me anything. And it was so frustrating and so upsetting. And I was post-op and I was trying to get up and they're like, you can't get up. So they kept giving me stuff because I was like, I'm going to go find my baby. And, I look back, it was so crazy. If someone had just stopped and talked to us.
Darlene, you're saying there's so many emotions. First of all, I'm just like, I have to break this. There's so many emotions going through my head right now. First with your husband at the time, then with the fact that you were separated from your baby for so long, then, having to have your sister be that support person and just make sure that you were protected. There's so many emotions. I want to get a sense in the room on this panel, because we're still at the level in our educational system where people don't know what the difference is between a doula or a midwife.
There you go.
Or an occupational therapist and a physical therapist, or an OB, or they know what an OB is. 98% or more births are occurring in our hospital systems, but people don't even know what they don't know. They don't know what's be
they don't
prepared for.
They need and
Exactly.
like everybody need. Like I look at you guys and I'm like, no one offered me a physical therapy consult, and I had 2 sections.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Dr. Martin, I want to ask you something. So how do you explain first and foremost, like the importance to your clients who are just like, do I need this? Or just kind of like thinking, am I at the point where I actually need a doula? Can I just, have my baby? I'll be okay. I'm not high risk. How do you just explain the value of just having someone in that room, even if it's going to be a hospital birth?
I think for a lot of people, it depends on where they are. And I think a doula can be beneficial, whether it's a first time birth, second time, or multiple, even beyond that. But I let people decide. My grandmother always used to say, you can take a pot of water, you can't make it drink. So give people all the information, because one of the problems that we have is people don't have the information with which they can make the best decisions for themselves. So I'll have clients that come in, they're thinking they're coming in for pelvic floor therapy during their pregnancy. And and I start asking them questions. How do you feel about this pregnancy? How do you feel physically? How do you feel emotionally? How do you feel expectation wise, right? Are you ready? Do you feel prepared? What about your postpartum? We start talking about those things. And it's in talking about those things that I think the reality hits a lot of people. And I said, well, do you feel supported, going into birth? What are your expectations for that? And sometimes that may be overwhelming. I had one client who I ended up being her doula because she says, this is our second baby, but my husband was no use the first time. I love him. He's great. He was absolutely no use. And he doesn't like hospitals. And I need somebody that can advocate for me, because my first birth definitely did not go the way that I wanted it to go. And, and I said, well, how so? You're healthy, your baby was healthy. Talk to me more about what it is that you want. And I don't feel like enough people have the opportunity to just be real and say, listen, this is what I need. Right. And in doing so, then, understand that there are other options out there. So I give people the information and I let them help them to understand that the doulas aren't only there for physical support. Listen, doulas know everything about everything and everybody. Like, doulas are the best connectors you will ever find. When I tell you they got a man for everything or a woman for everything, they got somebody. And so, they're a resource. They are there for that physical assistance. They are there for that emotional assistance and support. They're there to help you plan, to help you prepare, to help you feel like snug as a bug in a rug as much as you can, given the entire situation. And that sometimes is what people need. I have prayed with people. I'm like, listen, this is where you're at. Let's pray about it. Right. So that they could feel that spiritual comfort, so that they could feel emotionally supported. So it's not only, all right, let's do some hip squeezes. Let's make sure you're okay. But it's really, what does that person need? And I feel like helping them to understand that there's someone out there that can support them in that way is important.
I often will hear, well, it's not in my scope of practice. And I would love for Dr. Jessica, Dr. Catherine, you all to chime in, for this to be a popcorn style discussion, because to me, it's within anyone's scope of practice to make sure someone's okay. We're talking about a partner, we're talking about a family member, we're talking about that support from a doula, just making sure someone's okay. If they had blood loss that was more than anticipated, if they're feeling woozy standing at the sink trying to brush their teeth, they're not going to be able to walk around necessarily in their room holding their baby, going up and down stairs, trying to prep a meal. So why not make sure that people are okay? And so I really want to open it up to Jessica. How do you, before and after, since you're not there, either prepare people or even have those conversations that a support person would be a good idea, even if it's to support your person, right?
It's kind of easy for physical therapists, I believe, because we're one of those providers that we spend a lot of time with folks. It's not like 5 minutes every 6 weeks. Like, it's an hour, sometimes twice a week. So we spend so much time with people, and a lot of the things we're doing, we're using their limbs, right? So their mouths are free, their ears are free. So that's a lot of time where we have to connect. And when I interview patients in the beginning, I ask them these things like, what is your birth plan? Do you need help with thinking about these things. Have you thought about the different pain measures that you want to use or you don't want to use? Have you thought about the questions that you want to ask your providers? Have you thought about different birthing positions? Have you thought about the support that you would need outside of just having your birthing partner there because they helped you make the baby? You know, like seriously, when push comes to shove, what do you need? And that's why I love what Dr. Martin said is, if you can talk to people and they figure out what they need, then us as providers, we can tell them who they need. Because if they can just get their mouths moving and say, okay, I think I need this, I need that, I need that, I didn't think about that, but they don't know a lot of times where to go to find those things. I mean, you mentioned that a lot of people still don't know exactly what doulas do. A lot of people know that doulas are out there now, thank goodness, because I feel like it's a buzz right now in the community, but they still don't really know what they do. And so it's my job, I'm not a doula, but it's my job to understand what doulas do so that I can gear my patients in that direction, because I cannot be there on that day. They can be there on that day. I'm not in their homes all the time. So the postpartum doulas can be. So it's just a huge gap that I want to fill with them. But it all comes with like building rapport with the patients. And I think it's easy for physical therapists to do that. And it's not about your scope of practice, because we're really not treating just their diagnosis, we're treating people. And so you just have to meet people where they are and let them know who their resources are.
I think it's important, though. People have to understand everybody's scope is going to overlap. Now, no, I am not going to go and do a C-section. I'm not even going to deliver because, that's way out of my scope. But it's not way out of my scope to make sure that people have thought about postpartum. The thing I find is people really haven't thought about it. Like Jessica saying, and I have clients who think, oh, once I have the baby, I'm going to go home and everything's going to be great. And I'm like, you realize you're not going to be moving real fast. It's going to take you time to recover. And people seem to think that, the baby's going to come out and they're going to have like the family portrait. Oh, they're just going to be back to life. And I'm like, you will be eventually, but those first few weeks, you're going to be walking gingerly, even in the absolute best of circumstances. You deliver vaginally, no tear, and everything is great. A birth is a marathon. You have spent a lot of time. You have done the equivalent of hours of crunches, but you didn't go anywhere. And when they think about it, like for me, I think a lot of it is getting people to think, just to think about like, oh yeah, maybe I will get home, or I have stairs when I get home. What is that going to be like? Or my partner has to go back to work in 2 weeks. What is that going to be like? And just posing those questions and letting them ruminate on them, one way or that they can decide exactly how they want to deal with it. But my job, I think one of the biggest things is to just bring it to top of mind so that they can think about it, so they can talk with their partner like, hey, my doula said I need to have somebody here, your mom, my sister, who can we call upon? What, maybe should we start making some meals and putting them in the freezer? Do we need to buy extra toilet paper, just so we don't have to go out? Just to start thinking about it.
This is important. I'm really absolutely happy that you brought up those questions of the home environment. We talk about that now. Those of us on our panel, I've seen us all talk about that. And Dr. Sylvester, you probably, more than anyone probably on this panel has heard me say that the hesitancy in our hospital systems to provide these proactive services because one, we don't know how to bill for it. We don't know if we'll be reimbursed for it. And two, just administrative bullcrap that we are all like used to. There's really no good reason to say there's no evidence. That's another thing that we hear. And so I want to know from you, how have you circumvented the hesitancies of our hospital systems to provide services in the form of the questions that Darlene was just asking? Do you have stairs at home? Are you going to be alone when your caregiver, your support person is not in the home with you? Do you have other children at home? Did you have this birth? within a year of your last birth? Questions that anyone and everyone, when they walk into a hospital system, to have an unexpected outcome, right? Something they can't anticipate. I want to know how you're preparing people and how you've gotten around the administrative stuff that gets us in the way of providing ethical care.
So with our moms, when they come on board, we do about an hour and a half long interview. And so we get to learn everything about them, their lifestyle choices, just like everyone else has said, ask them questions. But along the course of the pregnancy, we infuse in them what Jessica and I like to call the mist mentality, where if they have a concern, that concern is going to be addressed. If they have a question, it's going to be answered. If they have a void, it's going to be filled. And we're able to do it because we have data. So we just had a mom who was asked to come in. And the sad part about having to choose sometimes is that we had a mom who knew the value of a doula, but she could only have 2 people in the room with her. So there was going to be her husband and her mother-in-law. And she, when it came down to it, was asked to come in for an induction that really, there was no medical reason that was given to her other than she was 40 weeks. Well, flash forward to her delivery, she ends up hemorrhaging. And in terms of like the things that you need after a hemorrhage, and you think about it, her hemoglobin went from 13 to 7, which is a big dip, a huge shock to the body, right? But of course, she had a vaginal delivery. So within 24 hours, they're thinking you can just go home, right? But in what we saw with her resting heart rate still at 95, it had only gotten up to about 89 during the pregnancy, but afterwards she was resting at 95 beats a minute. And her stress, while during the pregnancy was around 30, was up to 50 when you look at the HRV metric. And so with those numbers, she was able to get another day in the hospital. She got some platelets transfused before she left. And then when she got home, she thought that her husband was going to be able to go to work and that she was going to be fine, even though she was feeling tired. She was like, I know, after my first delivery, I'm going to be tired, but it's like, no, not this kind of tired. So what you're going to need to do is make sure that you are doing nothing except breastfeeding your baby, going to and from the bathroom, and letting everybody else do what you need done. Otherwise, you will end up back at the hospital. And because we had her data, she called up her doctor about 2 days later because her body still wasn't calming down. Her mother-in-law came over, did all the housework. Her husband stayed off of work, took her older child to and from daycare, because as a mom, she wanted her children to bond. And it's okay for your children to bond, but if you're having to run after the older one, then you're not resting. And so she had to make that decision based on her data to just let her son go to school. She got a follow-up visit with her OB within 3 days. And so she went back in, normally they wait the 6 weeks, 8 weeks. She got in 3 days because her data did not turn around. So we're able to, because they know that the mom is connected to someone who's also watching them, then they make decisions that are a little bit different than if the mom just came and said, I'm feeling tired. And so now they're being called to a higher standard because the women are armed with data. And so we don't always disclose. I mean, they don't always disclose that someone is monitoring them. But when it comes down to it, if they're being ignored, then they're able to take all of their summaries and all of their data to their providers and advocate for themselves. And so in her case, of course, a doula would have been amazing to have a doula. It would still be amazing to have a doula, but she couldn't choose the doula over, in her situation, she didn't want to choose the doula over the 2 people that she wanted in the room. So that's how we're circumventing it. And it's going pretty well so far.
In 2020, I reached out to you, Dr. Martin, because I was working in a silo. And I thought, what physical therapist is working with someone within 24 hours after that type of delivery that Dr. Sylvester was just describing, after a delivery where this person is not being monitored and their hospital team is ready to send them home. And I was floored when I found out, oh my gosh, you've been in the hospital working with moms. How did you do it? And how did you come to the point where you now have to teach other therapists to be the doula that person needs?
That it was always kind of a passion of mine to be able to do that, to be able to be in the hospital. And I had the benefit and the pleasure of working in mother baby, L&D, and the NICU. But the frustration, it wasn't a cakewalk. It was frustration because it was constantly like, we know this person just had a C-section. Why are they not being seen? Right. It was literally stalking the nurse's station going, who's delivering today? Who's on call today? How many babies you guys got today? Right. Because if not, we weren't getting anything. It was getting them trained to see when they had somebody who was high risk and hospital bed rest, that they called me so that I could come in and see them. And it was a constant struggle. So when I wasn't there, it wasn't happening. And I can only be at work so many days of the week. And that's where a lot of the frustration came in. Yes, I was fortunate to be able to see women, during the pregnancy, if they were in the hospital, and immediately afterwards, before they got sent home. And then sometimes, even if orders hadn't been called in, because I was constantly on the floor, I could go look and say, hey, who's this person and what happened? Put an order in now so I can go see them. Right? Just so that I can get eyes on these individuals. And if nothing else, screen them, make sure they have resources, those types of things. With regards to what I'm doing now, a lot of it comes from that history. One of my colleagues and friends, Dr. Amber Brown, and I co-founded a company called the Pelvic PT Doulas. And as a part of what we do, we train therapists, to become doulas. One of the reasons we wanted to do that, there's only so many of us, right? And everybody says, well, it starts with you and you can be the difference. Realistically, the way these maternity rates are stacked up, we can't. It's only so many of us. But if we can train other people, then we've got more people, right? We can build an army. And that's really what we want to do. COVID really made a huge difference because as us being doulas and being able to go into hospitals, a lot of doulas weren't allowed to go into hospitals. A lot of doulas were being turned away. There were some hospital, practices that were saying, doulas aren't allowed in the hospitals regardless. There were hospitals that were telling doulas they had to pay to come in, even though the doulas were working for the clients. It was a whole hot mess in some states. And it was a lot. As PTs, a lot of us work in acute care. If we're already there, we already have an in. We have an in from a clinical standpoint because we already have rapport, more than likely, with a lot of the providers there. So we have an advantage that the average doula won't have. And as such, we thought it was a fantastic idea to start training clinicians who could then, if they're in the hospital, they're already there, they could do this work. They're armed with even more tools. Even if they're not in the hospitals, they now can better educate individuals, not only the moms, but the families. Because I'm a big proponent. Yes, one person might be pregnant, but we got a whole family that's having a baby, right? And we need to be able to educate, whether there's a partner involved. If there's not a partner involved, then there's a family member who may be there. I've had several clients who, have said, hey, my partner died, or, my partner left, or whatever the case may be, but they might have a family member, a sister, a mom, a cousin, a best friend who wants to be there and be involved. So we want to arm them as well. And so part of what we've done is help to train other clinicians to be able to educate, to be able to serve, so that we can help to bring these numbers down, because they're really abysmal. They really are.
Just by how we look, no matter how many letters are behind our name, we are walking into hospital systems where we are, does anyone even know what it is now? In New York City, we're 9 times more likely.
12.
12, excuse me.
Unless the research has changed since it came out in 2019. Up to 12 times more likely in New York City. Mm-hmm.
Than our white counterparts.
Yep. 5.2 times more if we're college educated African-American woman compared to a non-college educated or high school educated white person.
Yep.
I was so excited when you were able to join on this talk, Dr. Martin, because Darlene Turner and I have been speaking about training the community, getting the community armed. With the two of you, you're working with the clinicians. Darlene, you're working with the community. How does one even start or spread the word about a community doula program? I don't even think that people understand or know what that is. What does that look like?
Well, I mean, I started working with the community. I work primarily with doulas in Texas, and that should just say a whole lot right there. We'll just let that sit right there because Texas has some of the worst outcomes in the country. A couple of years back, we had the whole thing where our numbers really came out, and everybody was like, wow, if y'all were your own country, you'd be like a third world developing country for our birth outcomes. And I mean, and that's the reality. And it is mostly among the Black and brown people. And then you have senators who are like, well, the numbers aren't bad if you don't don't count the Black women. It's like, excuse you. But that aside, there is no impetus in Texas to do anything for the Black and brown women. The only thing they really want to do is make sure their numbers don't look so skewy that people get in their business. If they've gerrymandered the numbers, so it's like, oh no, our maternal mortality rate's like 5%. Overall, it is 5 per 100,000. But when you stratify out and you look at Native American women, Indigenous women, Black women, our numbers are like 4 or 5 times white women. So it's a very disingenuous picture because, when it's all aggregated all together, it doesn't look so bad. But when you start pulling it out and, many folks think, oh, life is so good in Texas. You got Dallas, you got Fort Worth. There are probably 7 to 9 major metropolitan areas in Texas. The rest of that state is rural. I mean, painfully rural. We have more steers than people in some places. The Texas Longhorns, we have more of them than people in many areas. And some of these areas, you'll speak with people and they're saying, oh, well, I didn't go to my prenatal visit because it's 120 miles away. I had to find someone who could take me because we don't have a lot of public transit down there, especially in the remote areas. And I would have had to take the day off from work. And for a lot of people, that taking that one day off a month means their rent doesn't get paid. They don't have food, they don't have power and everything. So they met it out. Well, this month we had a little extra money. Okay, I'll go for my prenatal. I mean, so for people not to understand the constraints that people are working with, maddening. So I've just been looking at it like, well, why is she going 120 miles? Because they've also closed many of the rural hospitals and they're doing like regional medical centers. And I'm like, okay, can we have maternity centers, maternity home, what do they call them? Maternity home care places where we can have maybe a midwife, a doula, a lactation consultant, a PT person. Well, we can do that. So you approach the state, we start talking to people. Well, let's see what HRSA will do. Well, HRSA will only pay for, doctors or nurses to come in and we'll forgive their loans. Well, that doesn't solve the problem because after the 2 or 3 years when their loans are paid, they're like, deuces, I'm out of here. I'm like, I was at a conference and I was talking with someone and she was something like 11th generation Native American. And that's when it hit me like, that's who we should train. They're not going anywhere. They love their community. That's where their family is. That's where their home is. And so we're trying to work with a model where if we can get some folks even up to being like nurse practitioners, having people be able to get their prenatal care locally and only having to make the trek for delivery, just for delivery. Ideally, because Texas does allow home birth midwifery, doing more home births, but in the event that someone needs to be in the hospital to birth, they only have to go maybe once or twice. The person in their community who knows them, who knows the culture, who knows the habits of that person, what's of value to them, what is important, can record everything, and those records can go with that woman. Or even beforehand, she goes, she has her baby, and then she comes back, her postpartum visits there, people in the community are bringing her food that is amenable to her because it's from her community. She can do her breastfeeding. She can get doula support at home, postpartum support. We need to get some missed little things and we can put those on them. But I mean, when you really think about it, why should they have to go 120 miles, 80 miles, 60 miles to places where when they get there, people are unkind to them? Like, just get in the bed. It's like, whoa, why are you speaking to her that way? Why are you speaking around them because they're not very good. We have a lot of people who are not native English speakers, but we really trying to think, how can we improve outcomes in communities where for a lot of folks, it would just be good if we could just forget them, just they're over there. We can just, and we've had legislators just say, well, just don't count that data. It's like, no, you just can't disregard it. But that's the way they want to do things. But so we
You
are
can't erase
actively,
people. You cannot
I
erase
know you
people
can't erase
from our
people.
statistics. What Dr. Thompson and Dr. Sylvester, I'm going to land with you before we open it up to questions from our attendees. You have found ways, like Darlene is finding, in terms of bringing the community to people. You found ways to do that with technology. So you're very hesitant to sometimes talk about the watch or the technology, because it's more than that. It's more than you having the data, to prove to those providers in the hospital that this mom needs to stay longer. This mom's blood work needs to be checked. This, this and that. You have that data, but then at the end of the day, it was community. And Dr. Martin, before I let them actually speak on this, because the statistics are like in you, right? What happened between 2019 and 2020 with the Hispanic population? We were looking at metrics on a population that had the lowest maternal mortality rate. If we're looking at 3 racial groups in this country, and now they're shot up.
Well, part of it is one of the things, like Darlene rightly said, we have to acknowledge that the providers do not reflect the people that they're serving. They don't. And that is a huge problem, whether people want to admit it or not. There is a lack of cultural competency. There is a lack of understanding. And ultimately, there is a lack of empathy when it comes to these populations. When we look at a lot of the areas where we have predominantly Hispanic cultures, a lot of the South, the Southwest, a lot of these areas are very rural. In Georgia, for example, we've got 78 counties that don't have an OB-GYN in them. 78 counties. So you've got people that have to go 2 counties over, maybe 3 counties over, just to have care. And if we look overall at socioeconomic status, then that now plays into it, because people can't take the day off to go travel, all the way across the state just to go see a provider to come back, when they've got other kids, when they've got other, maybe they might be the sole breadwinner for a family, when maybe the partner is not there, because in order to make money, the partner has to travel even further. And so there are a lot of things that come into play, but unfortunately our system is not forgiving. The other thing is with the language barriers, you would think that being at 2022 that we would do a lot better than the language lines that hospitals have, but apparently we can't. And so the language barrier is still very much there, and people aren't getting the care they need. And I think with regards to communities and what has been told to me by a lot of, I grew up outside the country. I'm very comfortable in working with my immigrant population. And what a lot of people say, it's like, well, we just don't question the doctors. We just don't. So there's still a lot of this white coat syndrome that is occurring. They don't want to counter, even if they feel like something may be wrong, because they don't want to be in the wrong, or they don't want to say it because now how much is that going to cost? Or it's just that they're not being listened to. So there are a whole host of factors depending on the location and depending on the day that could be playing a significant role into the reason why a lot of these numbers are up. And it's really, really horrible.
Can I just add one other piece, Rebecca, before you go on? And I don't know what's going on in Georgia, but in Texas, we have a lot of mixed status families. Mm-hmm. So it's, I've had clients say, well, I was going to go, but my partner could drive. but he's not documented. So
Mhm.
if something happens to me, then, even if he's trying to advocate for her, then he's hostile. They
Mhm.
call whomever and he gets carted away.
Yeah.
They can't take that because they need both incomes and both people to keep their family together. So they risk the child because of his documentation
Because of
status.
status. Mhm.
And it's a really, like, y'all seen the news. It's ridiculous where we are. But for Texas, that is a huge issue. The issue of being documented or undocumented, or, I mean, that's in and of itself now a huge barrier for people getting care.
I've heard of a mother being taken away, a breastfeeding mother being taken away and held in an ICE detention center.
But the baby isn't.
But the baby is American,
not.
so they kept the
And
baby.
they
And
kept the
I'm
baby.
like, who in God's earth makes these decisions?
They
Right. And I mean, I only knew about
families-
this firsthand because my cousin was one of the immigration attorneys fighting for them.
Mhm.
And she was on the phone in tears. She's going like, I'm not a mom. You're a mom. What would you do? I said, baby girl, you got to fight. You got to fight for them. Because that could have easily been me. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
Right. That could have easily been me.
Exactly.
I've got
That's
3
so
little ones.
true.
But this little one, I mean, weeks old, weeks. We're not talking even toddler status, weeks. And this mom is being carted away.
And it's a
because
breastfeeding.
they're breastfeeding.
Mhm.
Right? To do what? To put this little kid in the system? Why? For a mom who has committed no offense other than the fact that she's here.
Mhm.
The level of insanity of that, I mean, I cannot put into words. I really can't. We're going to be talking about maternal mental health tomorrow night. And we're going to get into statistics that, unfortunately, and Jessica and Catherine, I want you to talk about technology that you're using, but we have to also acknowledge that right now, one of the largest threats in the first year is suicide. We're dealing with issues and systems that are only making mental health even worse, like that example. So how do you reconcile that we are going to be using more of this, in terms of technology, the watch, smartphone technology to educate our communities and educate their support people on knowing when enough is enough, in terms of activity. But how do we really connect that with who they need around them? Because if I'm sitting in an ICE detention center, it's not going to help me. They're not even letting me connect and bond with my newborn. So how are you bringing it all together for us? And what can we do with the people that are in this room?
So I was just going to say, one thing that we are starting to do is training women and their families to monitor themselves. So sometimes they're in places where they cannot always connect. So the way that our system works, they open up an app, information goes to a cloud, comes to our computer screen so we can see 24/7 what's going on with their sleep quality, their stress, everything. And so now we are starting from the very beginning and going to high schools. I guess that's not the beginning, but it's close enough to the beginning. High schools, college campuses, and teaching them how to use wearable data to have healthier lifestyles. And so we start there. That way, by the time they show up to motherhood and reproductive years, that they're already used to advocating for themselves. They're already used to using their data to guide their decisions, whether it's how they hydrate, the things they eat, the amount of sleep they get, the people that they keep around them, the relationships that they entertain, their work responsibilities and environment. Like, we are teaching them how to do what everybody should know how to do from the time that they walk into a doctor's office. And so I think that what we're seeing is, because one of our sweet Miss moms, she's on here, when they were told, you need to take aspirin, the question was why? What does it look like for me as a Black woman, right? Husbands emailing me articles talking about this looks like it might be good for white women, but it might not be, and only, about 15% of the time, but it might not be good for my wife. And so we're just going to do what we know is best. And we're going to, right now they're looking for another clinic go to a clinic who's going to listen to them. And so it's just a matter of getting people to that place where the technology supports their day-to-day decisions, but they are the ones that are speaking up and advocating for themselves, and their families are coming together to do the same. So now we have people who are like, no, you're not leaving today. I'll go get the do the laundry. I'll go pick up the groceries. We have people who now have communities around them who respect the technology. And so it's really nice because once you have that, then it's just a habit. It's a habit to wake up in the morning and check your body battery and say, okay, I'm at 100 today. Yeah, I can do all the things that I need to do. But if you wake up and your body battery is a 5, meaning like it's a gas tank that's almost on E, you can't run and do everything that you were going to do. Who is going to help you? But now they have it in their head that the people around them are going to be the ones to help them. Their job will modify their work responsibilities, because what they're not going to do is stay on their job when they know that it's taking away from their health. And so we're seeing women and their families make these decisions, save up financially so that when the 8th month of pregnancy comes, if someone says, no, you can't take off, what they've been doing is just leaving. They've just been leaving. And it's amazing because they can, right? I can take this leave early because I don't need your money. And so I think that for us, we are partnering with organizations that are meeting those needs, like the social determinants of health. So if a mom can work from home, but she needs an extra computer and a printer, now there's the organization that will pay for that. If a woman got sent to us, she was on bed rest for 55 days, and a postpartum doula was like, hey, I know the extent of what I can do, but I'm writing you into my grant so that we can support the mom with a watch. And so it's like, we're loving what the technology is doing for communities, because the birthing people and their families can now feel like they really played a part. And at the end of the day, if something goes wrong, they know that they did everything that they could, right, to have good outcomes.
So you said one of your moms is here, Dr. Thompson. Is that Gwendolyn?
Yeah, it is.
I would love to invite Gwendolyn. This is a platform that you can unmic. I have not blocked anyone from sharing. Will you share your story? And I'm going to try to bring you on stage.
Hi, everyone.
Hey.
Can you guys hear me?
Beautiful.
Yeah. Hi. Yes, I am a proud Miss Mom, and I'm so thankful for Operation Mist and the impact it's had on me. I joined Operation Mist. I found out about it a year after I had my first son, and I was not recovering well. I had developed preeclampsia in my first pregnancy. I was prescribed 2 blood pressure meds by my OB and just told to follow up with my primary care doctors. I kept going to see them and talking to them about it over that first year before I met with Catherine and Jessica. And I was basically just told, just keep taking it. You're just supposed to keep taking it. And I was explaining to them, like, something's not right. I'm not feeling right. They were just like, no, you need to take it as prescribed. And we were monitoring my blood pressure at home. And I was just like, something's not right. Like, when I take this as prescribed, I'm dropping like way too low. And I feel like I'm just gonna like fall flat on my face. Like, I can't. And that can't be, I have a newborn baby. So fast forward to when I met up with Catherine and Jessica. They recommended natural ways of helping me to manage my blood pressure, which one, I didn't know anything about needing a PT after at all in pregnancy. And that was foreign to me, but also just basic like diet modifications and knowing that certain exercises that I was doing that doctors were like, they were just like, oh, you just need a diet and you just need exercise. Well, what does diet look like? What specifically a meal plan that works for my body? Because in the world, when people say diet, you're just like, okay, I just need to eat this. I just need to eat this certain food group or this pyramid and stuff like that. And these things, and that wasn't working for me. And I was doing I was trying to do a lot of walking and running to help get down the weight, just to find out that is what was causing issues with my heart. And so per their recommendation, they did recommend I go see a cardiologist. And luckily I had already been with this program for a few months. And so I had data. So when I initially went to the cardiologist, he like kind of just was just like, well, you just need to take the medication as prescribed. And I was like, no, like, no, first of all, no, I'm here because I'm trying to come off of this medication. He also was just like, well, you had preeclampsia and you're lucky that you survived. Are you really going to try to have another baby? And I was like, first of all, no, like, we're not going to talk about that because you're not about to discourage me from having any kids. Like, this is our first appointment. This is my data. This is what my blood pressure looks like. And luckily I was already monitoring it very frequently. And they had had already told me to monitor it after eating, after activity. And so I had like documentation to show them like, this is what my body does. This is how this medication is interacting with me. And so he was basically like, oh my gosh, like, so this is what we need to do. You don't need to do cardio, which I was just like, okay, like I know that because Catherine and Jessica have already told me that. And then he put me on a specific cardiac diet. He was just like, try not the Whole30. He told the Mrs. Dash diet. And so he was just like, just, where you just use Mrs. Dash for seasonings. But luckily, I was already given like a meal plan of recommendations from the Miss program. So he was just like, yeah, let's just see how this goes. But he's like, if you're not consistent with the Dash diet, I want you to start on this medication. So he followed up with me 6 weeks later. I went in and like, they were just confused and blown away about the because I was that 6 weeks, I was just like, I'm about to show this man something, because he just said to me, he doesn't just basically discourage me from having kids. We're just like, well, even if you're able to get your body right, why would you want to put yourself through this again? And I was just like, no. So like you guys said, like, you have to have the right people around you praying for you, actually advocating for you, letting you know like, hey, something looks funny on your data. Like, what did you do today? What did you eat today? What's your activity? Like, what's going on? What's your stress like? And so with partnering with them, when I went back in 6 weeks, they were just confused. They were just like, oh my gosh, like what happened? Like, I was just like, I told you, like, I just needed you just to tell me what I need to know, which is I had basically everything I really needed except the information about the Dash diet. But after we added that in, like, it's been smooth sailing. And then shortly after that, like, my blood pressure was perfect. They were like, well, you don't need to follow up with us. I was just like, okay, well, I'll keep you as a resource, for my next pregnancy in case anything develops. And then after that, a few months after that, I'm pregnant with my second baby and everything is looking great. And so, but I also, I know, right?
My God, seriously. So information, if there is one thing I have heard on this panel tonight, is that information is absolutely empowering. It's
Yes.
life-saving. This is life-saving information. If there is one, we are going to do a hot round with the panelists tonight. Thank you so much, Gwendolyn, for sharing. We're going to do a hot round, 1 minute, not each, but 1 minute. We have about 15 seconds to just tell the attendees and those who will be viewing this later, what is one thing you want them to know if they are pregnant, if they are preparing for a hospital birth, if they're a doula, if they're a clinician in a hospital that is like, we don't see postpartum moms. We don't see the high-risk pregnancy patients that have been here long-term. There's one thing that you want people to know tonight watching this. What is it? Dr. Thompson.
Your birth experience should happen through you and not to you. So build your village so that it's possible.
Beautiful. Darlene.
Educate yourself and get support, because you're not going to get it in the hospital. You're going to have to be very proactive in your birth. Like Dr. Thompson saying, you be the driver of the train. Don't let it happen to you. Don't let them take you all over creation. You be the driver of the train, and you are going to have to be proactive. You're going to have to do a little bit of digging, but in the end, it is so, so worth it.
Beautiful. Dr. Sylvester.
Respect your design. You were designed to give birth. The people you were working with were designed to give birth. So never let them fear that. And then KH is a Miss Mom too. We love you too. Thank you for being on.
Hi, KH. Thank you so much for bringing your crew here, rolling in deep, Operation Miss. Dr. Martin, what would you say?
You truly do need a village. It does take a village. And so never forget that whether it's during pregnancy, everybody's focused on pregnancy, but this is a continuum. So we can't just stop at pregnancy and birth, right? We need to think the entirety of this process, pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. Plan, prepare, educate yourself, and recognize that you know your body better than anybody does. I might be a clinician, but I have not lived in your body. Be confident in who you are and in what you know, and then seek people that will support you along the way. The people that really are going to be there for you are going to be there to support you and affirm you. They're not going to be there to tear you down.
The people in this room are who give me hope, or who give me hope. These are the people that I would pay unlimited amounts of money to save my life and save me time with the people that I love. And I cannot thank you all enough. This is such a timely conversation. I will leave your information in the notes for this episode for people to view later so that they can contact you, whether it's the training that you provide to communities, to clinicians. People need to know who you are, what you do, and how to grow with you. So thank you so much for your time tonight. And thank you to our attendees who joined us tonight.